Hey, everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of Lowdown on Low Code, a mostly weekly podcast brought to you by your friends at analysis.tech. We are an advisory firm that focuses solely on low code. Thanks for joining us. If you like this content, hit the like button, hit the share button, tell your friends, tell your neighbors. We have these conversations that dive into low code, like I say, just about every week. Really excited about today's conversation. I think, as those of you who've tuned in for some time, we have made it a point to have as guests some of the founders of the low code market, going back even before it was called low code. And today we've got someone who has been at it for a long time. In fact, he's been at it for such a long time, you might even think of him as an oracle for this subject matter. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my partner, Rick Greenwald. Rick, welcome. And why don't you introduce us and let's get going.
Thanks, John. Yeah, and it's a real pleasure for me to welcome Mike Hichwa to the program. If you don't know Mike Hichwa, it's not for any lack of contribution he's made to the world of low code or low code platforms. I mean, Mike has been at this for a long time, as John said, and we're going to ask him to tell us about that as a starting point. And Mike's also a great guy. I've known him personally for about 25 years. So let's just jump into it, if you don't mind, Mike. And by the way, I should mention Mike is a senior VP at Oracle. Been there for quite a while, but I'm sure he'll get into that as we talk about the history. Because as I mentioned, you've been involved in low code and low code platforms for a long time. And I think it'd be really interesting to let people know in this podcast how long and basically how you started and what that road has been like from then until now.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that introduction. So, I got a job out of college. I did some Oracle work for 2 years at a defense contractor, and then PL1 programming and COBOL programming. And then I wanted to get another job, and I got a job in 1988 with Oracle. First day in the job, they told me do Oracle Forms, and I just loved it. It was Oracle Forms 2.3 or 2.1, both versions, I think, and I just loved it because I really loved the ability to create applications, and it was pretty straightforward. It was character mode at the time, eventually became Windows, but it was really a great way to create applications, and you could do reports and forms, and it was just wonderful. So I got my start on the first day of the job at Oracle doing forms, and then there's more to the story, but that answers your question of how I got started in it. And I've literally loved creating applications, and from day one at Oracle, 37 years ago, that's what I've been doing.
And then how did you move to the I mean, that was how you started with forms, but of course you're the father, grandfather, whatever you want to call it, of what is now Apex, but started out as
Yeah.
WebDB and HTMLDB.
So that's an interesting story. So you have to understand, at the time, like in the early 90s, Windows was dominant, right? This is before the internet and before anything. And low code, people built applications using low code. The idea that you could write native Windows code, that was really specialized work. That was really hard. And so there are hosts of companies, like Oracle Forms, Power Builder, Visual Basic, Delphi, Fox Pro. There are a lot of things. So people don't know. We didn't call it low code. Maybe call it RAD, Rapid Application Development.
4GL.
4GL, exactly. Yeah. And that was the norm, back then. Then the internet hit, which of course changed everything. And at the same time, Java was coming, and HTML and CSS, all these things. And so what it allowed the industry to do is it allowed them to build at no cost, using open source technologies, these applications built on a web browser, a universal client. So the browser-based applications were superior to the Windows-based apps, and they were at no cost to build. And what that did is it took all the wind out of the, quote, low code 4GL, rapid application development, however you want to phrase it, took all that wind out. But then building web applications was hard. And so I never lost the faith in these abstracted model driven developments. And so from the early on days in the mid 90s, even before Netscape came out, that browser using Mozilla, I started creating what became WebDB, which was the predecessor to HTMLDB, which got renamed to Oracle Apex. But basically, it was to have that forms experience, but without the constraints of forms. So forms was you had a block on a table, but it was very limited. But with I wanted to be able to create wizards and of course the web is stateless, right? And so in forms it was stateful. So if you wanted to have 10,000 concurrent users, it was out of the question. And so there was a lot of problems to be solved with stateless application development. And so there was a lot of computer science and engineering that went into that space that was very interesting from my perspective. But
Interesting. So Mike, you've been at this a long time. How has you've talked about how some of the technology has changed? How have how has development changed? And we're particularly interested in the empowerment of more than just those really skilled folks that you talked about who were doing native Windows apps, and folks who were doing business apps. Perhaps they had just some ambition and a lot of business knowledge, but they really weren't. We call them citizen developers sometimes. How have you seen, sort of the people and the process change as you've gone through your journey?
yeah, so I think the idea that people in an organization have a single title, and you have people that just do application development and people that just do sales or finance or other things, that those lines are blurring. I think that when I joined the industry, they were pretty straightforward. The computers were too complicated and they had to be done by a specialist, just like complicated plumbing might have to be done by a plumber. And so, but I think that as applications, as technology evolves, the expectations evolve. And as Google provides search, people are expecting to search everything the same way you can search it on Google. And so all these expectations are constantly, so if our tools get better, developers challenges don't get worse, they just get the expectations are just raised. And so the idea that I love the idea, I just love it, that the fact that you can, without you shouldn't have to have any extra technical expertise, and it's absolutely required to do your job. And I love the fact that you can work on a team, because I think that any evolution or any project that's ever been done is of any value has been done with a cross section of people that provide different inputs and different perspectives and different expertises. And so the idea that you can low code allows you to more seamlessly integrate those citizen developers or those technical experts with the process, and they can get their hands in and use it. It's not that hard. And so it's really about knowing what you want to build, the actual practice of actually physically doing it. The idea is to make that as easy as possible. The intellectual property is the vision of the app and what the app needs to do.
Right.
But
You reminded me of something that we've done a couple of episodes recently about low code in for enterprise apps, and the one of the themes that has come through is there are foundations that are important: data, integrity of data, et cetera, that are pretty well beyond any citizen developer. And so I love the fact that you're bringing out teams where you're bringing so you'd bring in folks who can mine those foundations and make sure that they're in good shape.
and we've been
I do agree with that. So I want to comment on this. So
Sure.
if you talk about application development, it's frequently a team of people that are building it. And you talk about enterprise, now you're talking about sensitive data. You're talking about things that if they go wrong, the company could have significant impact, and that's sort of the definition of enterprise. And so there are a team of people that when enterprise applications are created that do sophisticated data models or security, compliance, DevOps, CI/CD, high performance high availability failover, networking, all these types of things. And there are a lot of dedicated people to that. And the idea is that the application development process, you could have a citizen developer contribute to it, bootstrap the processing, things like that. But eventually, you're going to want to have these professionals make sure that it's deployed. When we deployed applications for the pandemic, we had the U.S. government come and run pen tests and do all sorts of things to verify that we don't mess up the United States' response to the COVID epidemic.
And I think it's important. I just want to add one little thing in here because you talk about the team with the citizen side and the business sponsors and IT. And the one thing I found over my many decades in this industry is you may or may not succeed by relying on IT, but you cannot succeed if the citizen stakeholders are not involved.
Okay.
And I've had to explain to IT people all the time, they're the ones who quantify what success is. Okay. So
Right.
if they don't think it's a success, it's not a success. So the idea that they can be more integrated to the whole process, it just makes all that
And I
work
think
better.
that's happened over time where I know in the industry 10, 20 years ago, it was an us versus them. If anything needed to be done, you had to call the IT department, and the IT department may or may not have time for you. And so, but I don't believe that's true anymore. And I think it's a good thing.
The
Great.
only thing I think that we'll get to this later, but I think there's a little bit of a danger of overswinging that pendulum too, saying we don't have to involve IT because just like you said, Mike, that long list of things you listed, citizen developers don't even know what that list means.
Exactly.
It's not their domain. They
But
are
they don't
very good
care.
at
They
what
don't care. It's not their job, right?
they're very good at what they do, and that's not what they do.
Exactly. Yeah.
So those are some of the pitfalls that you've seen, Mike. Are there advantages that you see, particularly with the modern, approaches to low code, the content, the new ones that you find are underappreciated and really need to be highlighted? And feel free to get into agentic if you like.
Okay. Um, so, uh, eh, um, without just going into the AI aspects of it, which of course is huge, there are underappreciated aspects of low code, and it gets to what is the core of low code. And to my perspective, the core of low code is about creating a model. So the model can be stored in different ways, but it's basically an abstraction layer. It's basically taking things that you want and abstracting them. So it's a report that has faceted search. It's a form that has lists of values and validations. But as opposed to capturing the code or engineering code, you're engineering concepts, which typically I refer to as a model. And so I think when people evaluate low code systems or they look at low code or they try to define low code, they kind of miss it, or sometimes they do, because they look at it and saying, well, how nice is your drag and drop, or how visual is your coding, or how can you do a regression testing from within the IDE? And to me, that's very interesting, and of course it's required, and of course it's helpful. But the core value of low code is about this abstraction. And so, what's interesting is you can abstract lots of things, and lots of industries provide lots of levels of abstraction. So abstraction is something that is driven humanity and driven engineering for a long time. And low code development is just one aspect of this abstraction, this model based thing. And so I believe that you can abstract agentic workflows. You can abstract many different aspects. And I think that is the secret sauce of low code. And so vendors' ability to capture a specific use case or a specific industry problem is in the value of the elegance of the abstraction and the model. And of course, you can screw it up. You can have a great model and have a bad generator and not able to create a good application, or you could have security flaws that are just bugs. But the idea is that the value of low code, it has to be appreciated as a model. And I'm not sure everyone gets that as much as they should.
And let me have a follow up from there because you mentioned earlier some of the things that citizen developers don't do. But I think there are probably some things which are kind of hidden pitfalls if you depend too heavily on low code or use it the wrong way. And you do find out those problems down the road when they're much worse. But could you talk about some of those things? As you've been doing this for so long, you've solved so many of those problems. I think a lot of other people aren't even aware of them.
It's a lot of this is where the team really helps. And so some people are very good at usability. They just have an innate knowledge of human nature and how big a button should be, where it should be placed, what it should be called. Should it have a 3-step wizard or a 2-step wizard? No wizard at all. So we call these people user experience experts, and sometimes they might use Figma to do mock-ups and things like that. But they're absolutely critical. Now, every once in a while, you find someone that literally knows everything. They can do performance tuning, data modeling, application development, and they do the UX. But these are, 1 in 10,000 style people, and so in the real world, you need these sets of people. Then you also need security experts when your applications become more sophisticated. You need guardrails. You need all these types of people, and that's kind of what's wonderful about IT is that you can bring these people in. When we bring in security people, what's interesting with low code is that they evaluate the low code system, and they know that the low code system prevents certain types of malicious activity. And so they don't have to look at every single application because they know any application built in that framework, it's good for this, maybe not for that, but they know what they need to do. So it's about reduction in effort. So like if you're building a car, you can just build it by hand, maybe like Aston Martin might do with a factory, and a bunch of guys just go and build one car, or you can put it on the assembly line. The assembly line is way more efficient. And so this is what these low code systems do is they provide efficiency, and you don't have to go and make sure every bolt was torqued the right amount. Like it's just done by a proper factory or a framework.
Let me follow up with your point about models. By the way, our colleague Francis Carden would be jumping up and down for joy because he's been making that point uh, repeatedly. Anyway, let me go back to that though, Mike, because there are those who say, and they're usually developers who have had success with coding, and they'll say, you know, I get it about low code, but the model restricts what I can do. And it puts you often people who talk about a ceiling, or it puts me in a box. And when I hit something that the model doesn't accommodate, I'm in trouble. How do you respond to that
Well,
for
you
them?
put your finger on the thing. And so um, I was one of those people. I was in forms and I wanted to do user interfaces that it would not let me. So I started generating what we call the forms INP file and tried to trick it and do all these backdoors to try to get it to give the user experience that I was after. And so this is this is the root core of what when low code makes sense and when it doesn't, and it is about control. It's about the control of the system and what it needs to do. And so not all low code systems are the same, and they can target different audiences. And so the audience that or the application you're building might have one system might be great at X and another system might be better at that, or better at Y. And so um, it, it, I find that a lot of applications can be done in low code. When they can't be done in low code, that's why we call it low code, is that you can have a plugin or you can have full control within the low code system. So it's not a question of all or nothing. It's a question um, uh, of if you hit this wall, can you work around it in a reasonable way? And if the answer is yes, you win. And I know you coined the term low code, and I think it's brilliant because it captures that exact dilemma of oh, I can't use a rapid application development system because I have to be able to do arbitrary things. I can't be constrained. And you
Right.
aren't constrained, but the idea is the simple things are done simply, and the complicated things are done with an escape clause.
Right. It strikes me, Mike, and I don't know if you agree with this, but understanding the model that the low code platform is based on would be really important because they're not all the same.
And they have
Some
different characteristics, right? So if you're all about workflow, maybe a thing that's just totally workflow based and RPO, what RPA or whatever, robotic process automation, all those types of things, it is different, but it's getting the right model for the right job.
Yeah, yeah, great. We're going to do a quick commercial break here, folks. Again, you are listening to the Lowdown on Low Code, a mostly weekly podcast from analysis.tech. We appreciate you tuning in, downloading. If you like what you're hearing, if this is helpful, Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, hit the like button, share, share the content. This is all for the community and to advance all of our knowledge. And now we'll get back to our conversation with Mike Hichwa. Mike, we unfortunately have lost Rick.
Yeah.
He I don't think it has anything to do with AWS, but anyway, he's lost his connection. We talked a bit about citizen developers. What about pro developers who choose to go over to low code and to sort of eschew coding? It seems like that's a thing that like seems like a lot of pro developers are beginning to adopt or are now adopting low code. Have you seen that? Is that something that's in the
So
apex?
I think a lot of them are, but I think a lot of them aren't. And but I do think the industry is at an inflection, and that inflection is being driven by AI. So I believe that in the enterprise, in the Fortune 5,000, in big company IT land, that most development is done in React or open source languages, and there are advocates for low code within those, and there are pockets, but it is 10% or 5% or 9%. It's not the norm. It's the exception. And
Right,
I do believe that AI is a catalyst for changing those proportions, because now anyone can generate 30,000 lines of quality code in an afternoon. And so, can an organization manage that technical debt? Can anyone understand it? How do you evolve it? So, there's so many questions. And so, I believe that it comes back to the model. And so, if you can use AI to generate a model, it's so much better. And so, I think what companies are going to realize is that if they put the biggest premium on excellent user interface, then why not just handcraft everything? That sounds fine. If you're building 3 applications, that's fine. It works. But if you're wanting to build more, and customers are continuously, as the market evolves, they're going to want their applications to leverage AI and provide predictions and summaries and all kinds of other things. And having to hand code all that just sounds unreasonable. And generating the code sounds like a technical debt nightmare. And so I believe this model driven development married to AI could allow low code to become as popular as it was in the Windows era, 25, 30 years ago. And so
interesting.
I do believe it's on a way back. I believe that there's market dynamics as well at play. And so frequently low code platforms come at a premium price, yet
Mhm.
you can build out solutions using React and other open source at no cost. There is a cost, of course, but it's not an upfront licensing cost, and you're not locked in per se. You can use whatever open source you want, and so those combined, I think, I do believe that if the industry can sort is and make low code systems that are less costly, that and with AI generation, it's gonna be a swing back. And I think it become more popular. And one
That's
more point on this: in general, in my experience, when I talk to a lot of customers, some of the smartest, most capable programmers, smartest people that can totally code it are the biggest advocates for low code. So you would think the biggest advocates for low code would be the citizen developers, but in my experience, people that go to the conferences and present on it are the most technical, the most capable, and they see the vision of this model-based abstraction and really promote
interesting.
it.
So it sounds like you are a skeptic about vibe coding. It's a way to create a lot of technical debt. It's hard to control. That's what I heard you saying. Did I get that
Yes and
right?
no. And so if you're new to coding or you're new to application development, I find vibe coding as an excellent learning tool to explore the possible and to get your feet wet. So it's just remarkable. So you want to be a programmer. You just graduated from college, or you're just wanting to be a programmer, and you just have to be able to specify what you want in natural language, and it will generate the code for you. So then, well, why don't we look at the code that it generated? Well, if it's Java and you have all these classes, or if it's JavaScript and you have all this complexity, you kind of can't make heads or tails. But if you generate a model which is human readable and you can clearly see it and you can diagram it, then it's really compelling. So I see vibe coding as a way to prototype, a way to bootstrap, a way to learn. And so I'm not anti-vibe coding. I love the concept, but you can't say I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night, and therefore I'm capable of building an enterprise application. In which case, you should do spec to code. And there's a lot of like OpenAI is doing a lot of research in the spec to code space, and it could become very sophisticated and complicated. And 5 different ways to verify that the spec was properly, implemented into the model. And so I do believe that I love vibe coding. I think it's a great thing, but it has its
I,
space. And then if you want to do something real, it's spec to
I
code.
think what you're saying too is that vibe coding, if there's not a model, if there's not a repository, you can't refine what you've done. And every
Yeah.
system in the world needs refinement. Even if you create it perfectly day one, day two, it's not perfect anymore. And the thing that we struggle with here a little bit is I think some vibe coding systems don't have a model, don't have a repository. They say just do it again.
Yeah,
Well,
I was speaking to vibe coding to a model, which I understand that most vibe coding is not to the model, and it hits exactly what Rick was talking about, which is generating
and
gibberish
by the way,
to the
not just
uninformed.
gibberish, Gen AI is non-deterministic. It generates different gibberish in different times to the same prompt, which is wow, that's kind of insane if you're talking about building enterprise apps, at least.
But it depends on what you
Yeah,
want.
yeah,
So
yeah.
your company, what do you want to own? What do you want to be responsible for? What is your job? You can buy SaaS software if you need to have sales forecasting or ERP. You can buy that, right? And or you could build it. So if you're going to build it, what do you want to own? So some people might want to own the whole thing because they want to optimize user experience. They want every pixel to be the way they want it to be. But I believe the sweet spot is in this low code space where you want to own it, but you want to own it at an abstraction, at an easier level. You don't want to own every last detail of it.
And and
Yeah.
and not only that, since you don't familiarity with some of those details, the default choices it makes will probably be better than the ones you would make in your ignorance and lack of awareness.
Who knows what's going to be in 10 years? But 1 year ago, vibe coding or code generation was at a certain level. In 1 year's time, I have no way to say this, but in my head, it's like 3x better than it was a year ago. So if the quality of code generation is growing at 300% per year, then like whatever you generate today is going to be crap tomorrow. And so anyway, I just love this concept of being able to it's just smarter development to be able to generate to a model and then have the model, the platform that underpins the model that can then run the model can improve without you having to change. If your model is good, if you like your model, the system can improve by simply upgrading the platform, and
So
the
so
model's interpreted better tomorrow than it is
so vibe
today.
coding's
And
almost an interface more than the whole thing itself.
Yes, some of
I
the
see this.
some of the platforms, Mike, have introduced machine learning in the generation of the application from the model, so they can highlight security holes that you might have inadvertently introduced, or runaway processes or things like that, which can happen even with a model. So you get a chance to the platform gets really smart. I want to go
It's
back
really
to
cool. I mean, the fact that these multi-step AI assistants can not with the proper specifications can generate these models, and then they can test them and then run them, and then they can see the results of them, and they can take actions and correct them. They can improve performance.
right.
They could do a scale test saying, well, can 100,000 people run this application? If you put that in the spec, it will generate that test spec, run the JMeter test or whatever you use, and validate that that's true or not true, and then try to take according actions, because these large language models can take everything that's on the public internet, everything anyone's ever like committed to the internet, and they can typically pretty efficiently find what a reasonable answer is and implement it. As Rick says, it might be a different answer on Monday than it is on Tuesday, but it is a new world, and it's important to know that your objective as an application developer isn't necessarily, when or if you're building a platform, it's not to be able to build yesterday's applications better. It's being able to build tomorrow's applications better and being able to evolve. Like as Rick said, that 80% of your time on an app is not spent pre GA or first deployment, the version one. That's 20% or thereabouts. The other 80% is in the life cycle that goes after that. And so anyway, it's
Oh, I want to go, Mike. I want to go back to something you said a few minutes ago, and that was you talked about technical debt, and I wonder. One of the things I'm curious about is I I mean we've always known about technical debt, but it was never much of a motivator of behavior, of buying behavior, and of the way that people approached application development. Now it seems like it might have become a motivator, and I wonder what you're hearing. Are you actually hearing from customers part of the way we're going forward doing application development going forward is to avoid technical debt because it's terrible.
I think if you were to draw a diagram, like, and the industry was okay with accumulating more debt, I'm okay with a little more debt, I'm okay with a little more debt, but at some point you reach this maximum where companies are just not okay with it, and they have to have a methodology to get away from it. But
Mhm.
having less automation is not an acceptable answer. Pretty much most companies, most CTOs are going to tell you our company needs to modernize. We need to have the best IT systems. So we need more technology, but we don't need more debt. And so, how do you solve that problem? And that's where I see that in the past, low code was perhaps not adopted as much because of the cost barriers, because you could do it in open source, because there weren't the need for as much automation. But in the future, I believe that the technical debt and the need to modernize and keep up with everyone else is paramount. If you don't automate or you don't evolve technologically, many companies could go out of business. And so it's imperative, but can they afford the debt is what you're getting at. And I
Right,
think they need to have a architecture that supports that.
right. Thank you, that's great. Hey Rick, we're down to our final question. Glad you were able to come back and ask that because I know that's near and dear to your heart.
It is indeed. And I know I can't tell you, this has been such a fascinating conversation with me. We've looked at this stuff from a depth that we normally don't get to do. But there, I know, Mike, because I know you. I know you have that low code is not your only love or interest in life. So to kind of completely change it up, I'd like to ask you if you could maybe name five of your favorite bands. You don't have to be your five favorite because that's very hard to specify. But what are some of the bands that you really like too?
Yeah, sure. So I liked like some of these proto punk bands like the Sonics out of Seattle. I just love them. They were influences to a lot of much more popular bands that you might have heard of. I like this very British band called The Jam. I just love their storytelling and things like that. I'm a sucker for sort of pop songs like the Beatles or the Clash, or the Red Hot Chili Peppers, REM, maybe Green Day, maybe that's more than five, but those are the types of music that I really like. And different days or other things. I was just recently playing the Sultans of Swing, Mark Knopfler, Dire Straits.
Oh,
It's just such he's just so good. I'm just blown away. It's like, oh my, that's just so good.
Mike, thank you so much. This has been a really insightful conversation, and we're really grateful that you could bust out of your very busy schedule and join us on the Lowdown on Low Code. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for inviting. Take care.